June 1944. The vast expanse of the Philippine Sea was about to become the graveyard of imperial ambitions. For 2 years, the Pacific War had raged in a brutal island-by-island struggle, but the ultimate climax of naval aviation was now at hand. The United States military had launched Operation Forager, a massive amphibious invasion targeted at the Mariana Islands, specifically Saipan, Tinian, and Guam. These islands were not just pieces of land. They were strategic launch pads. If the United States captured the Marianas, they would be within striking distance of the Japanese homeland using their newest weapon, the B-29 Superfortress. The Imperial Japanese High Command fully understood the existential threat. In response, they activated Operation Ago, mobilizing the absolute maximum strength of the Imperial Japanese Navy fleet. Admiral Soimu Toyota placed Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa in command of a formidable strike force built around 90 aircraft carriers and nearly 500 operational warship planes. Ozawa's mission was definitive: execute a decisive battle, destroy the American fleet, and save the Empire's inner defensive line. But the sky over the Philippine Sea was no longer a welcoming territory for the Japanese. The United States Navy's Fifth Fleet, commanded by Admiral Raymond Spruance, was waiting with 15 fleet carriers of Task Force 58, carrying over 900 advanced combat aircraft. More importantly, the Americans possessed a technological secret weapon that would utterly redefine aerial warfare: an invisible network of advanced radar and combat direction that the Japanese could neither see nor comprehend. The Japanese tactical plan relied heavily on a geographic advantage. Admiral Ozawa knew that American carrier aircraft had a limited operational range, generally requiring them to be within 200 miles of their targets. However, Japanese planes were lighter, carried no heavy armor plating, and lacked self-sealing fuel tanks, which allowed them to fly much further up to 300 miles or more. Ozawa intended to use this range differential to launch massive airstrikes while keeping his precious aircraft carriers completely out of reach of American counterattacks. Furthermore, Ozawa planned to utilize the land-based airfields on Guam and Rota to shuttle his planes, allowing them to attack the American fleet, land on the islands to refuel and rearm, and then strike the Americans a second time on their return journey. It was a brilliant mathematical strategy on paper. What Ozawa did not realize was that American land-based bombers and fast carrier groups had spent the previous weeks systematically pounding the airfields on Guam and Rota, leaving their runways cratered and their aircraft. The land-based support Ozawa desperately counted on was already non-existent before the first carrier plane took off as dawn broke on June 19, 1944. The invisible war of technology claimed the first victory. High atop the masts of the American warships, the massive mattresses of the SK and CXAM air search radar antennas were silently sweeping the horizon. Deep inside the hulls of the ships, in darkened rooms known as the Combat Information Centers, or CICs, specialized teams of officers tracked glowing green radar scopes. At exactly 5:47, radar operators on the battleship USS Alabama picked up a faint but undeniable echo on their screens at a massive distance of 130 miles. It was Ozawa's Raid I, the first wave of nearly 70 Japanese aircraft rushing toward the fleet. The American CICs instantly turned into high-tech command posts. Plotters used grease pencils on large plexiglass boards to track the enemy's altitude, speed, and heading. Within seconds, the fighter directors radioed the information to the combat air patrol floating high above. Instead of being caught by surprise, American pilots in their powerful Grumman F6F Hellcats were systematically guided by radar controllers directly into the path of the oncoming Japanese formation, gaining the ultimate tactical advantage of altitude and positioning before the enemy even knew they were there. When the American Hellcats plunged from the clouds, the aerial slaughter began. The sky erupted into a chaotic web of machine gun tracers and burning metal. The Japanese pilots of 1944 were no longer the elite, battle-hardened veterans who had attacked Pearl Harbor. Those men had been systematically wiped out at Midway and Guadalcanal. The new pilots were raw, rushed recruits with barely a few dozen hours of flight training, flying against heavily armored American aircraft flown by highly experienced combat veterans. The F6F Hellcat was engineered specifically to destroy the nimble Japanese Zero, possessing superior speed, rugged durability, and 6 devastating 50-caliber machine guns. As the two forces collided, the Japanese formations fractured instantly. The lightweight Japanese planes, filled with high-octane fuel and completely lacking armor, ignited like paper matches when struck by American heavy machine gun bursts. Within minutes, dozens of Japanese aircraft were spinning out of control, plunging into the dark blue water below. An American pilot, viewing the sheer ease with which the enemy planes were being shot down, radioed back to his carrier hull with words that would define the day. "Hell, this is like an old-time knack-knack turkey shoot." Despite the slaughter of the first wave, Admiral Ozawa stubbornly launched Raid 2, a massive strike group of over 130 aircraft, including torpedo bombers and dive bombers. Once again, American radar operators picked up the incoming threat over 100 miles out, giving the CIC directors ample time to vector fresh squadrons of Hellcats into interception vectors. The second wave ran into an absolute wall of American fighters. Hellcat pilots executed aggressive, coordinated sweeps, tearing through the Japanese bomber escorts and hunting down the vulnerable torpedo planes. Individual American aces made history in mere minutes. Commander David McCampbell single-handedly shot down multiple enemy aircraft in a single sortie, setting a trajectory toward becoming the Navy's top ace. The few Japanese planes that managed to slip past the fighter screen and reach the American warships found themselves facing a secondary technological nightmare: the revolutionary radio proximity fuse, used in the anti-aircraft shells of the fleet's 5-inch guns. These fuses contained tiny radar transceivers that detonated the shell automatically when it came within 70 feet of an aircraft, filling the air with lethal shrapnel without needing a direct hit. The sky turned into a black wall of flak, wiping out the remaining attackers before they could drop a single weapon, while the air above Task Force 58 was filled with the roar of burning engines. The underwater war launched a catastrophic blow against the heart of the Imperial Japanese fleet. While Admiral Ozawa was completely focused on managing his airstrikes, 2 American submarines, the USS Albacore and the USS Kavala, had slipped past the outer destroyer screen of the Japanese carrier formation. At 9:10, the albacore spotted Ozawa's magnificent new flagship 30,000-ton aircraft carrier Taiho as it was launching planes. The submarine unleashed a spread of 6 torpedoes. Though a heroic Japanese pilot deliberately crashed his plane into one of the torpedoes to save the ship, a single torpedo struck the Taiho on her starboard side, fracturing fuel lines and cracking her aviation gasoline tanks. Hours later, the USS Kavala found a second target, the veteran fleet carrier Shokaku, a survivor of the Pearl Harbor raid. The Kavala fired a devastating spread of 3 torpedoes, ripping open the carrier's side. Both ships became ticking time bombs. Inside the Taiho, inexperienced damage control crews inadvertently spread highly volatile gasoline fumes throughout the entire enclosed hangar deck by turning on the ventilation systems. A single spark ignited a monumental internal explosion that literally blew the armored sides out of the carrier, causing the pride of the Imperial Navy to rapidly capsize and sink, while the Shokaku disintegrated under similar fuel-air explosions. By the afternoon of June 19th, the Japanese carrier aviation force was effectively extinct. Ozawa had launched a third and fourth wave of attacks, totaling over 100 additional aircraft, but the results were uniformly catastrophic, guided unerringly by radar directors. The American Hellcats intercepted the remaining raids over the open sea and near the island of Guam, where desperate Japanese pilots tried to land on the ruined airfields. Out of the nearly 374 aircraft Ozawa had launched from his carriers that morning, less than 50 returned to his ships. The American fleet had suffered virtually no structural damage, with only a few minor bomb hits on a couple of battleships and carriers, and lost fewer than 30 aircraft in combat. The defensive tactical victory was total, completely breaking the back of Japan's naval air arm in a single 12-hour period. But the commander of Task Force 58's fast carriers, Admiral Mark Mitcher, was not satisfied with a mere defensive win. He wanted to hunt down and completely eliminate the fleeing Japanese ships before they could reach the safety of their home waters. On the afternoon of June 20th, American scout planes finally located Ozawa's retreating fleet far to the west. The enemy was at an extreme range of nearly 270 miles a distance, so great that a strike mission would mean American pilots would have to fly at the absolute limit of their fuel capacity and return to their carriers in total darkness. A notoriously perilous task for naval aviators. Admiral Mitcher made a bold, calculated command decision. He ordered the launch of over 200 combat aircraft, declaring that the chance to destroy the remnants of the Imperial Navy was worth the extreme risk. The American strike force caught up with the Japanese fleet just before sunset. Hellcats, Avengers, and Helldivers plunged from the evening sky, hammering the remaining Japanese warships. They sank the fleet carrier Hio and severely damaged 2 other carriers, alongside several battleships and cruisers, while wiping out the last remaining handful of operational Japanese fighter planes. The striking power of Operation Ego was permanently crushed. The real crisis for the American aviators began during the return flight. As the planes flew eastward, their fuel gauges dropped dangerously close to zero, and a pitch-black night blanketed the Pacific Ocean. Most of the pilots were completely untrained in night carrier landings, and looking for a blackout ship in the middle of a dark ocean was nearly impossible. Recognizing the imminent disaster facing his brave aviators, Admiral Mitcher made another legendary rule-breaking decision. He gave the unprecedented order, "Turn on the lights." Suddenly, the entire Task Force 58 illuminated the night sky. Powerful searchlights shot straight up into the clouds like pillars of light. Deck lights were turned on bright, and cruisers fired star shells to light up the ocean surface. Though it exposed the entire American fleet to potential enemy submarine attacks, the gamble paid off. Armed with these visual beacons, over 100 planes managed to crash land or safely trap onto the carrier decks, while pilots who ran out of fuel ditched safely in the water near friendly destroyers, resulting in the rescue of the vast majority of the downed crews. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot was the definitive end of an era. The Battle of the Philippine Sea completely annihilated Japan's capability to wage large-scale carrier warfare. The Imperial Japanese Navy had lost 3 vital fleet carriers and over 400 irreplaceable aircraft and trained pilots in just 2 days. For the rest of World War II, the remaining Japanese aircraft carriers were nothing more than empty, useless hulls, stripped of their strike capacity and forced to act as mere decoys because there were no longer any pilots left to fly from their decks. The United States Navy had achieved absolute, undisputed mastery of the Pacific skies through a perfect fusion of American industrial might, superior pilot training, and revolutionary radar technology. The strategic gateway of the Mariana Islands was secured. The path to the Japanese homeland was thrown wide open, and the global dominance of the United States military was demonstrated to be an unyielding, unstoppable force of modern tactical warfare.